Welcome to Unit 8, Mod 43 and 44. We're talking about the connection between stress, health, and illness. Here are your learning objectives, and here is your vocab. So, stress, first let's get this straight. There are stressors in the world. Stressors are the events, okay? They do not contain any stress, everyone reacts to things differently. Some people react to a stressor with a lot of anxiety or a lot of stress, and other people don't really react to it much at all. Or, it's a nuisance and then they move on. So stress is our reaction to the experience of the stressor. So we have the stressful event like a math test. And then the important part is our cognitive decision making about that event. If we decide, oh my gosh, this is I can't do this course, I can't do this test, then the response is we're going to be so stressed out that it's probably not going to be helpful for us for the test, and just cause a whole stress response in the body. So the sympathetic nervous system kicks in. If we respond to the stressor, like the math test again, with the feeling that it is a challenge instead of a threat to us, like, wow, this is a really tough course, so I'm going to do my best, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to make time to study, and whatever. So if we attack it that way, that's actually a healthy, still a stress, it's a stressor, but our reaction to it is a much healthier view that's going to help us be more successful. So, like I was just kind of indicating, stress isn't really just a bad thing. We think of that word as a bad thing, but in a world where there is no stress, you'd be very bored. So little stressors motivate us, they encourage us, they challenge us to excitement, right? So think of athletes or entertainers, teachers, any job that there's little challenges. People like that, they enjoy that, and we thrive when we are challenged appropriately. What isn't helpful is extreme or prolonged stress. So, for example, troops in heavy combat in Vietnam suffered an increase in health problems later in life that were not related to any sort of injury compared to those who were not in heavy combat. So catastrophes obviously play in as a big stressor. So pretty much everyone reacts to a catastrophe and they appraise it as a stress, not a challenge. So they're unpredictable, they're large scale, and they can cause a lot of human damage. So just looking at polls 4 weeks after Hurricane Katrina, the suicide rates in New Orleans had tripled. So catastrophes they disrupt so many things that they're just more likely to cause mental health issues, sleeping issues, all sorts of things. And they could even require people to move, right? To relocate. And when relocating means going to a different country, you have another big level, significant life change. Meaning the culture is different, the language might be different, and so you're experiencing culture shock at the same time that you really are kind of processing the catastrophe. So those people are even at higher risk for the negative effects of stress. So significant life changes, examples would be graduating, leaving for college, having a new baby, getting married, losing a job, starting a new career, losing a loved one, things like that. So when asked 15,000 Canadians, those that said that they were trying to take on too many things at once, the response was that young adults scored the highest in that category. What's interesting is that daily hassles can actually be more harmful than other types of stress because They're like little things that just build up, and they're every single day. So these examples of these are like rush hour traffic, family issues, like not big things, long lunch lines, busy schedules, friend issues, things like that. Some people, like we've talked about, can shrug off more of those things, and other people, they affect them more greatly. So it's about appraisal, how they appraise these situations. Also, it's very important to note that some people really have a lot more daily stressors than other people. If someone is very affluent and they are very, they fit into the culture, they are very accepted by the culture, then their daily hassles are much, much less. Those who are in the lower class or in a marginalized group or a group that might experience microaggressions all day long, those are groups that are in a more severe type of prolonged stress situation, and they're most at risk for physical and psychological. So you know that stress, like S is for stress, so sympathetic nervous system, it kicks in, that fight or flight, the epinephrine, norepinephrine start reacting and getting our body going. They're deterring the blood flow to prepare to fight. So things like your digestion, all that stuff is going to slow down. All of your organs are kind of getting less things except for your heart, which is beating quickly, right? So the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, also are telling the adrenal glands to release stress hormones. We didn't really talk about those much in detail before, but what you need to know is that the one of the important hormone that is secreted is cortisol. That's an important stress hormone that's secreted in the gut. Hans Seeley, he studied the stress response system, and he came up with what is known as the general adaptation syndrome. It's a response system that kind of explains what our body does. So no matter if we're reacting to a bear, we're reacting to a test, a social situation, whatever it is, this stress response is always the same. So here it is. It's called the general adaptation syndrome, and we call it GAS for short. So there are 3 stages, and you need to know these. The first stage is the alarm stage. So this is kind of the shock stage. This is when epinephrine and norepinephrine are starting to kick in. You kind of might be in a state of shock about what's happening. Your body is like starting to adjust, right? Then is the resistance stage. So everything is still up from stage 1. Your blood pressure's up, your body temperature's up, like you are ready to fight. Like resistance stage, think like they're ready to resist, they're ready to fight. And after so long, so if your body stays in resistance stage long enough, there's only so much that your body has before it starts to give out. And so exhaustion is the 3rd stage that kicks in. And this is where we become very vulnerable to illness. In extreme situations, you could collapsing and dying are possible. Like that's extreme, but exhaustion kicks in, and that's more likely when you're going to get sick. So prolonged stress is now what we're talking about. So in the brain, production of new neurons actually decreases also. There's something called telomeres. I think we've discussed that in the development unit. But these are the little pieces at the end of our chromosomes, and they naturally shorten as we age, but they start to deteriorate with stress, not just aging. So that can actually make people seem older, look older. In times of stress, particularly women, seek out and give support to those who need it, but also they seek out support for themselves. The other option, which men more than women do this, which they withdraw, they might seek other ways to cope with stress, such as alcohol use, or just become angry and aggressive. So we are more vulnerable to disease when we are stressed for a prolonged time. So psychophysiological illness means some sort of illness that is related to stress. So, for example, hypertension, high blood pressure, like those things are related to stress. Depression, some headaches, obviously not all headaches are related to stress. Psychoneuroimmunology studies this. So it studies how psychology, the neural system, and the endocrine system all connect and affect the immune system. So for types of things in the body that are affected by stress, let's look at what is in the immune system and fights off disease and illness. So we have lymphocytes. There are two types. They are white blood cells in the immune system. There are B lymphocytes. So remember, the B is for bone marrow because B lymphocytes are in the bone marrow. And those are used to fight bacterial infections. And then we have T lymphocytes, and the T is for the thymus. And that also attacks things like cancer, virus, any sort of foreign substance. So here's just a little chart that actually goes through your B lymphocytes, your T, and then two more that wasn't on the previous slide that you do need to know, especially natural killer cells, I feel like come up a little bit more. And so make sure you pause and look this over. So does stress make us more vulnerable to disease? We already said yes. So if you are stressed and you come out of surgery, you're going to heal more slowly. When they did a study and they put a cold virus in the nose of people, and those that live stressful lives, 47% of those people developed colds, as compared to 27% developing colds in the people who were not stressed. So stress and AIDS. So stress also suppresses our immune. It is an immunodeficiency virus. So it lowers your body's ability to fight off illness. So obviously stress is not good for people who have HIV and AIDS. More than 25 million people worldwide have died of AIDS, and it cannot, stress can't, just like it can't give you cancer, it can't give you these things, but it can quicken the process from HIV to AIDS because stress reduces your immune system, which kind of quickens the process. Stress and cancer. Like we just said, stress does not create cancer cells, but does it make it harder for the body to fight off cancer cells? Well, in rats, they have found through studies that yes, it definitely does. But with human studies, there's more mixed results. There's not a clear answer yet. Stress and heart disease. Heart disease is a clogging of our vessels that nourish the heart muscle, and it's the leading cause of death in the United States and many other leading countries. So this is an important study. They did a study of 3,000 healthy men. They interviewed them, they took note about what kinds of jobs they had, what their eating habits were, their manner of talking, their behavioral patterns, and they grouped these people into two groups. They either said, okay, this person is more of a type A, which is a person who's competitive, hard driving, impatient, super motivated and time conscious, and they tend to be more aggressive, at least verbally. Type B were the people that they found to be more relaxed and easygoing. So after 9 years, 257 of the 3,000 men had suffered a heart attack. 69% were type A. And when we look at the type Bs, those that were the most type B or the higher on the spectrum of type B, there were 0 cases of heart attack. So they're showing that there's a link between heart disease and our reaction to stress. There are more so this brought about a whole bunch more studies. So for example, there's studies on pessimism that show that type of thinking as well is 2 times as likely to get heart disease compared to optimist. Depression doubles the risk of heart attack. Work stress, 88% increased risk of heart attack. And then any sort of trauma stress, 3 times the normal risk. So all of these things there are the stressors, but then there are the appraisal of that stress. So the way that people deal with the stress, there's a connection, there's a link to heart disease. So behavioral medicine, who kind of look at all of these connections, reminds us that everything psychological is simultaneously biological. There is a stressor, and then our body gets inflamed, right? Because our body's kind of not doing the normal functions. It's in sympathetic mode, which means a lot of our organs are shutting down and not working the way they should be. For example, the liver isn't clearing out cholesterol the way it normally does because energy is diverted away from the liver during that fight or flight response. So depressive symptoms can result or can just be happening already, and those lead to more inflammation and then cardiac disease, which also leads to inflammation, which could also cause depression. And so it's this vicious cycle of stress and then unhealthy behaviors and thoughts. So your takeaways. Stressors happen to everyone, but it is how people appraise the situation that creates stress. Daily stressors tend to be more harmful and significant than life changes. The most at risk are the poor and the discriminated against. Remember the general adaptation syndrome, which is ARE, alarm resistance. Remember that stress negatively impacts our immune system, but it can't cause cancer. And then remember the difference between type A personalities and type B personalities and how they can affect heart disease. So, modules 43 and 44, and I will